Package org.paros proxy.paros.core.spider. Import java.utility vector. Public class A extends org.paros proxy.paros.core.spider.tag. Parser for a tag. Private static final parser tag parser equals new parser tag, a, parser tag dot closing underscore tag underscore yes. Parser for href attribute in tag. Private static final parser attr parse rate ref equals new parser attr.href. Private string href equals. Get an array of A tags. At param doc. The HTML document to be parsed. At return array of A. Public static A get as, string doc. Vector as equals new vector. Parser.parse, doc. While, parser.next tag. String content equals parser.get content. String address equals parser.get address. AA equals new A. A.build address, address. A.build, content. As.add element, A. A result equals new A as dot size. Result equals, A, as dot to array, result. Return result. Protected void build address, string address. Super.build address, address. Href equals parse rate ref dot get value, address. At return returns the href. Public string get href. Return href. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. Import java.awt.frame. Import java.awt.headless exception. Import javax.swing.jpanel. Import javax.swing.jbutton. Import org.paros proxy.paros.extension.abstract dialog. Import java.awt.gridbag layout. Import java.awt.gridbag constraints. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class about dialog extends abstract dialog. Private jpanel equals null. Private about panel equals null. Private jbutton btn ok equals null. At throws headless exception. Public about dialog, throws headless exception. Super. Initialize. At param arg0. At param arg1. At throws headless exception. Public about dialog, frame arg0, boolean arg1, throws headless exception. Super, arg0, arg1. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This dot set content pane, get jpanel. This dot pack. This dot set size, 406, 463. This method initializes jpanel. At return javax.swing.jpanel. Private jpanel get jpanel. If jpanel equals null. Java.awt.gridbag constraints 6 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridbag constraints 5 equals new gridbag constraints. Jpanel equals new jpanel. Jpanel.set layout, new gridbag layout. Gridbag constraints 5.grids equals 0. Gridbag constraints 5.grid equals 0. Gridbag constraints 5.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 0,0,0,0. Gridbag constraints 5.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.both. Gridbag constraints 5. Anchor equals java.awt. Gridbag Gridbag constraints 5. Weights equals 1.0 d. Gridbag constraints 5. Weighty equals 1.0 d. Gridbag constraints 5. IPatty equals 2. Gridbag constraints 5. Gridwidth equals 2. Gridbag constraints 6. Gridx equals 1. Gridbag constraints 6. Gridey equals 1. Gridbag constraints 6. Insets equals new java.awt.insets 2,2,2,2. Gridbag constraints 6. Anchor equals java.awt. Gridbag constraints southeast. jpanel.add, get about panel, gridbag constraints 5. jpanel.add, get bnoke, gridbag constraints 6. Return jpanel. This method initializes about panel. At return proof secure.paros.view.about panel. Private about panel get about panel. If about panel equals null. About panel equals new about panel. Return about panel. This method initializes btn-ok. At return javax.swing.jbutton. Private jbutton get bnoke. If btn-ok equals null. btn-ok equals new jbutton. btn-ok.set text, ok. btn-ok.add action listener, new java.awt.event.action listener. Public void action performed, java.awt.event.action event e. About dialog.this.dispose. Return btn-ok. At javdecl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 10,10. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. Import java.awt.gridbag constraints. Import java.awt.gridbag layout. Import java.awt.layout manager. Import javax.swing.image icon. Import javax.swing.jlabel. Import javax.swing.jpanel. Import org.paros proxy.paros.constant. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class about panel extends jpanel. Private static final string product equals constant dot program underscore name. Private static final string version equals version plus constant dot program underscore version. Private static final string copyright equals copyright, c. 2003 to 2005 Kinotech Technologies Company. Private static final string license underscore detail equals HTML body p. Plus this program is free software, you can redistribute it and plus modify it under the terms of the clarified artistic license as published in the Free Software Foundation. Plus this program is distributed in the hope that it will be useful, but without any warranty. Plus without even the implied warranty of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Plus see the clarified artistic license for more details. Plus P. Plus P for queries please send to font color equals blue contact at parosproxy.org font P. Plus body HTML. Private static final string other underscore license equals HTML body. Plus P. This product includes softwares developed by the Apache Software Foundation. http www.apache.org. A licensed under Apache License 2.0. Plus HSQLDB is licensed under BSD license. JDIC is licensed by Sun Microsystems, Inc. under the LGPL license. Plus the copyrights of these softwares belong to their respective owners. Plus body HTML. Private JLabel LBL name equals null. Private JLabel LBL disclaimer equals null. Public about panel. Super. Initialize. At param arg0. Public about panel, boolean arg0. Super, arg0. Initialize. At param arg0. Public About Panel, Layout Manager ARG0. Super, ARG0. Initialize. @param ARG0. @param ARG1. Public About Panel, Layout Manager ARG0, Boolean ARG1. Super, ARG0, ARG1. Initialize. This method initializes this. @return void. Private void initialize. Gridbag constraints 8 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 7 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 6 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 5 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 4 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 3 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 2 equals new gridbag constraints. Gridbag constraints 1 equals new gridbag constraints. LBL disclaimer equals new JLabel. LBL name equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel LBL copyright equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel Blother copyright equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel LBL version equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel abla program name equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel abla copyright detail equals new JLabel. javax.swing.jlabel LBL logo equals new JLabel. This .set layout, new gridbag layout. This .set preferred size, new java.awt.dimension, 350,400. This .set background, java.awt.color.white. This .set size, new java.awt.dimension, 0,0. This .set border, javax.swing.borderFactory.createEdged border, javax.swing.border.edgedborder.raised. LBL logo.set text. LBL logo.set icon, new image icon, get class, .get resource, resource paros underscore logo 64x64.gif. LBL logo.set name, LBL logo. Abla copyright detail.set text, license underscore detail. Abla copyright detail.set preferred size, new java.awt.dimension, 300,120. Abla copyright detail.set font, new java.awt.font, default, java.awt.font.plain, 11. Abla copyright detail.set name, Abla copyright detail. Abla copyright detail.set background, java.awt.color.white. Abla program name.set text, product. Abla program name.set font, new java.awt.font, default, java.awt.font.bold, 36. LBL version.set text, version. LBL version.set font, new java.awt.font, default, java.awt.font.plain, 18. LBL version.set name, LBL version. LBL version.set background, java.awt.color.white. Ablother copyright.set text, other underscore license. Ablother copyright.set preferred size, new java.awt.dimension, 300,80. Ablother copyright.set name, Ablother copyright. Ablother copyright.set font, new java.awt.font, dialog, java.awt.font.plain, 11. Ablother copyright.set background, java.awt.color.white. LBL copyright.set text, copyright. LBL copyright.set preferred size, new java.awt.dimension, 0,0. LBL copyright.set font, new java.awt.font, default, java.awt.font.plain, 11. LBL copyright.set name, LBL copyright. LBL copyright.set background, java.awt.color.white. lblname.setIcon, new image icon, get class, .get resource, resource paros_name.gif. lblname.setText. lblname.setName, lbl name. This .set font, new java.awt.font, default, java.awt.font.plain, 11. lbl program name.set visible, false. lbl program name.set name, lbl program name. lbl disclaimer.set text, HTML body p disclaimer. You should only use this software to test the security of your own web application or those you are authorized to do so. parosproxy.org takes no responsibility for any problems in relation to running paros against any applications or machines p-body HTML. lbl disclaimer.set preferred size, new java.awt.dimension, 300,60. lbl disclaimer.set name, lbl disclaimer. lbl disclaimer.set font, new java.awt.font, dialog, java.awt.font.plain, 11. lbl disclaimer.set background, java.awt.color.white. Grid bag constraints 1.gridx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 1.grid equals 0. Grid bag constraints 1.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 1.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 1.grid height equals 2. Grid bag constraints 2.gridx equals 1. Grid bag constraints 2.grid equals 0. Grid bag constraints 2.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 2.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 3.gridx equals 1. Grid bag constraints 3.grid equals 0. Grid bag constraints 3.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 3.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 3.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 3.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,2,2,2. Grid bag constraints 4.gridx equals 1. Grid bag constraints 4.grid equals 1. Grid bag constraints 4.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 4.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 4.anchor equals java.awt.gridbagconstraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 4.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 0,5,0,5. Grid bag constraints 5.gridx equals 1. Grid bag constraints 5.fill equals java.awt.gridbagconstraints.horizontal. Grid bag constraints 5.weights equals 1.0d. Grid bag constraints 5.grid equals 3. Grid bag constraints 5.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 5.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 5.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. Grid bag constraints 6.gridx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 6.grid equals 5. Grid bag constraints 6.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 6.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 6.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. Grid bag constraints 6.weights equals 1.0d. Grid bag constraints 6.gridwidth equals 2. Grid bag constraints 6.anchor equals java. Bag constraints.horizontal. Grid bag constraints 7.gridx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 7.grid equals 6. Grid bag constraints 7.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 7.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 7.fill equals java.awt.gridbagconstraints.horizontal. Grid bag constraints 7.anchor equals java.awt.gridbagconstraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 7.gridwidth equals 2. Grid bag constraints 7.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. Grid bag constraints 8.gridx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 8.grid equals 4. Grid bag constraints 8.ipadx equals 0. Grid bag constraints 8.ipad equals 0. Grid bag constraints 8.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 8.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.horizontal. Grid bag constraints 8.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. Grid bag constraints 8.weights equals 1.0d. Grid bag constraints 8.gridwidth equals 2. This.add, blah program name, grid bag constraints 3. Grid bag constraints 1.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 1.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 5,15,5,15. Grid bag constraints 2.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 3,5,5,10. Grid bag constraints 2.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Grid bag constraints 5.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. This.add, LBL version, grid bag constraints 4. This.add, LBL logo, grid bag constraints 1. This.add, LBL name, grid bag constraints 2. This.add, LBL copyright, grid bag constraints 5. This.add, LBL disclaimer, grid bag constraints 8. This.add, LBL copyright detail, grid bag constraints 6. This.add, LBL copyright, grid bag constraints 7. At javdecl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 7,0. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class about window extends abstract frame. Private about panel equals null. Public about window. Super. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This dot set cursor, new java.awt.cursor, java.awt.cursor.weight underscore cursor. This dot set resizable, false. This dot set content pane, get about panel. This dot pack. This dot set size, 426, 425. Center frame. This method initializes about panel. At return org.paros proxy.paros.view.about panel. Private about panel get about panel. If about panel equals null. About panel equals new about panel. Return about panel. At javdecl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 10,10. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. Import java.awt.card layout. Import java.awt.dimension. Import java.awt.frame. Import java.awt.graphics configuration. Import java.awt.toolkit. Import java.awt.window. Import javax.swing.jwindow. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class about window old extends jwindow. Private javax.swing.jpanel jcontent pane equals null, at javdecl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 19,20. Private about panel equals null. Public about window old. Super. Initialize. At param arg0. Public about window old, frame arg0. super, arg0. Initialize. At param arg0. Public about window old, graphics configuration arg0. Super, arg0. Initialize. At param arg0. Public about window old, window arg0. Super, arg0. Initialize. At param arg0. At param arg1. Public about window old, window arg0, graphics configuration arg1. Super, arg0, arg1. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This dot set content pane, get jcontent pane. This dot set visible, true. This dot set size, 405, 317. This method initializes jcontent pane. At return javax.swing.jpanel. Private javax.swing.jpanel get jcontent pane. If jcontent pane equals null. jcontent pane equals new javax.swing.jpanel. jcontent pane.set layout, new card layout. jcontent pane.add, get about panel, get name. Return jcontent pane. This method initializes about panel. At return com-proof secure.paros.view.about panel. Private about panel get about panel. If about panel equals null. About panel equals new about panel. About panel.set name, about panel. Return about panel. Center this frame. Private void center frame. Dimension screen size equals toolkit.get default toolkit.get screen size. Dimension frame size equals this .get size. If frame size.height screen size.height. Frame size.height equals screen size.height. If frame size.width screen size.width. Frame size.width equals screen size.width. This dot set location, screen size.width, frame size.width, 2, screen size.height, frame size.height, 2. Public void set visible, boolean show. Center frame. Super dot set visible, show. At javdecl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 39,10. Package org.paros proxy.paros.core.scanner. Import java.utility vector. Import org.paros proxy.paros.network.http message. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Abstract public class abstract tap param plugin extends abstract tap plugin. Private vector list variant equals new vector. Private variant equals null. Private name value pair original pair equals null. Public void scan. List variant.add, new variant Turl query. List variant.add, new variant form query. 4. Int I equals 0, I list variant.size, and, is stop, I++. HTTP message equals get nyumsk. Variant equals, variant, list variant.get, I. Variant.set message. Scan variant. Private void scan variant. 4. Int I equals 0, I variant.get param list, .size, and, is stop, I++. Original pair equals, name value pair, variant.get param list, .get, I. HTTP message equals get nyumsk. Scan, message, original pair.get name, original pair.get value. Abstract public void scan, HTTP message, string param, string value. Set the parameter into the current message. The position will be handled by the abstract class. If both param and value is null, the current parameter will be removed. At param message. At param. At param value. At return. Protected string set parameter, HTTP message, string param, string value. Return variant.set parameter, message, original pair, param, value. Package org.paros proxy.paros.core.scanner. Abstract app plugin is an abstract base class for plugins basing on the hierarchy of the site to perform a test. Each URL under the selected node will be traversed and launch a plugin to test. Multiple threads will be executed. But abstract app plugin must complete before another can start. Abstract public class abstract app plugin extends abstract plugin. Public void notify plugin completed, host process parent. No need to notify parent this plugin is completed. Host process will wait each abstract app plugin to finish. Package org.paros proxy.paros.control. Import org.paros proxy.paros.extension loader. Import org.paros proxy.paros.model. Import org.paros proxy.paros.view. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public abstract class abstract control. Protected extension loader equals null. Protected model equals null. Protected view equals null. Public abstract control, model, view. This dot model equals model. This dot view equals view. Public extension loader get extension loader. If loader equals null. Loader equals new extension loader, model, view. Return loader. Protected void load extension. Add common extension. Add extension. Get extension loader, start lifecycle. Implemented by subclass to add specific plugin for the control. Protected abstract void add extension. Add plugin common to all control here. This is added before all other control specific plugin. Protected void add common extension. Public void shutdown, boolean compact. Get extension loader, destroy extension. Model.getDB, close, compact. Package org.paros proxy.paros.core.scanner. Import java.utility vector. Import java.utility regex.pattern. Import org.apache.commons.client.uri. Import org.apache.commons.client.uri exception. Import org.paros proxy.paros.network.http message. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Abstract public class abstract default file plugin extends abstract host plugin. Private static final pattern items equals pattern.compile. Private static final string special underscore tag underscore list equals @given. Private static final string tag underscore replace underscore list equals CGI bin CGI local height bin CGI win bin scripts. Private URI base URI equals null. Private vector list URI equals new vector. Protected void add test, string directories, string files. String dir list equals null. File list equals null. String dir equals. File equals. Directories equals directories.trim. Files equals files.trim. 4. Int I equals 0, I special underscore tag underscore list dot length, I++. Directories equals directories dot replace all, special underscore tag underscore list I, tag underscore replace underscore list I. Try. dir list equals pattern items dot split, directories. File list equals pattern items dot split, files. 4. Int I equals 0, I dir list dot length, I plus plus. dir equals dir list I dot trim. If dir starts with dir equals plus dir. 4. Int j equals 0, j file list dot length, j plus plus. File equals file list j dot trim. Try. URI equals create URI, base URI, dir, file. List URI dot add, URI. Catch, URI exception EU. Catch, exception E dot print stack trace. Private URI create URI, URI base, string dir, string file, throws URI exception. If dir starts with dir equals plus dir. If file dot starts with and dir ends with file equals plus file. String path equals dir plus file. URI equals new URI, base, path, true. Return URI. At return returns the base URI. Public URI get base URI. Return base URI. At return returns the list URI. Public vector get list URI. Return list URI. Public void init. Base URI equals get base emsc, dot get request header, dot get URI. Public void scan. 4. Int I equals 0, I get list URI, dot size, and, is stop, I plus plus. URI equals, URI, get list URI, dot get, I. HTTP message equals get nyumsk. Try. Message get request header, dot set URI, URI. Message get request body, dot set length, 0. Send and receive, message. If, is finally exist, message. Bingo, alert.risk underscore medium, alert.suspicious, URI.tossed ring, message. Catch, exception E. Package org.paros proxy.paros.extension. Import java.awt.dimension. Import java.awt.frame. Import java.awt.headless exception. Import java.awt.toolkit. Import javax.swing.jdialog. Import org.paros proxy.paros.constant. Abstract base class for all dialog box. Abstract public class abstract dialog extends jdialog. Protected abstract dialog. This dialog equals null. At throws java.awt.headless exception. Public abstract dialog, throws headless exception. Super. Initialize. At param arg0. At param arg1. At throws java.awt.headless exception. Public abstract dialog, frame arg0, boolean arg1, throws headless exception. Super, arg0, arg1. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This dot set visible, false. This dot set font, new java.awt.font, dialog, java.awt.font.plain, 12. This dot set default closey operation, javax.swing.window constants.dispose _on _close. This dot set size, 300,200. This dot set title, constant.program _name. Center this frame. Public void center dialog. Dimension screen size equals toolkit.get default toolkit, .get screen size. Dimension frame size equals this .get size. If frame size.height screen size.height. Frame size.height equals screen size.height. If frame size.width screen size.width. Framesize.width equals screensize.width. This dot set location, screensize.width, framesize.width, 2, screensize.height, framesize.height, 2. Public void set visible, boolean show. If, show. Center dialog. Super dot set visible, show. Foundation, Inc., 59 Temple Place Suite 330, Boston, Massachusetts 02111-1307 USA. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. Import java.awt.dimension. Import java.awt.toolkit. Import javax.swing.jframe. Import org.paros proxy.paros.constant. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public abstract class abstract frame extends JFrame. This is the default constructor. Public abstract frame. Super. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This set icon image, toolkit.get default toolkit, .get image, get class, .get resource, resource paros _logo 48x48.gif. This set visible, false. This set title, constant.program _name. This set size, 800, 600. This set font, new java.awt.font, dialog. java.awt.font.plain, 11. Center frame. Center this frame. Public void center frame. Dimension screen size equals toolkit.get default toolkit, .get screen size. Dimension frame size equals this .get size. If, framesize.height screensize.height. Framesize.height equals screensize.height. If, framesize.width screensize.width. Framesize.width equals screensize.width. This set location, screensize.width, framesize.width, 2, screensize.height, framesize.height, 2. At Java visual info decl index equals 0 visual constraint equals 31,17. Package org.paros proxy.paros.core.scanner. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Abstract public class abstract host plugin extends abstract plugin. Public void notify plugin completed, host process parent. Parent.plugin complete, this. Package org.paros proxy.paros.extension. Import java.awt.component. Import javax.swing.jpanel. Import javax.swing.jtabedpane. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class abstract panel extends jpanel. This is the default constructor. Public abstract panel. Super. Initialize. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This set size, 300,200. Public void set of focus. Component C equals this get parent. If, C instancy of jtabedpane. Jtabedpane tab equals, jtabedpane, C. Tab.set selected component, this. Package org.paros proxy.paros.common. Import org.apache.commons.configuration.file configuration. Import org.apache.commons.configuration.xml configuration. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Abstract public class abstract param. Private file configuration config equals null. Load this param from config. At param config. Public void load, file configuration config. This .config equals config. Parse. Public void load, string file name. Try. Config equals new XML configuration, file name. Load. Catch, exception e.print stack trace. Public void load, throws exception. Config.load. Parse. Public file configuration get config. Return config. Implement by subclass to parse the config file. Abstract protected void parse. Package org.paros proxy.paros.view. Import java.awt.card layout. Import java.awt.frame. Import java.awt.gridbag constraints. Import java.awt.gridbag layout. Import java.awt.headless exception. Import java.utility enumeration. Import java.utility hash table. Import javax.swing.jbutton. Import javax.swing.jlabel. Import javax.swing.joptionpane. Import javax.swing.jpanel. Import javax.swing.jscrollpane. Import javax.swing.jsplitepane. Import javax.swing.jtextfield. Import javax.swing.jtree. Import javax.swing.tree.default mutable tree node. Import javax.swing.tree.default tree cell renderer. Import javax.swing.tree.default tree model. Import javax.swing.tree.tree path. Import org.paros proxy.paros.extension.abstract dialog. To change the template for this generated type comment, go to Window, Preferences, Java, Code Generation, Code and Comments. Public class abstract param dialog extends abstract dialog. Private object param object equals null. Private hash table table panel equals new hash table. Private int exit result equals joptionpane.cancel_option. Private javax.swing.jpanel jcontentpane equals null. Private jbutton btn ok equals null. Private jbutton btn cancel equals null. Private jpanel equals null. Private jsplitepane equals null. Private jtree param equals null. Private jpanel1 equals null. Private jpanelpane lparam equals null. Private jtextfield text headline equals null. Private default tree model equals null. At javdecl index equals 0 parse visual constraint equals 14,12. Private default mutable tree node root node equals null. At javdecl index equals 0 parse visual constraint equals 10,50. Private jscrollpane equals null. Private jscrollpane 1 equals null. Public abstract param dialog. Super. Initialize. At param arg0. At throws headless exception. Public abstract param dialog, frame parent, boolean modal, string title, string root name, throws headless exception. Super, parent, modal. Initialize. This .set title, getrutnode, .setazir object, root name. This method initializes this. At return void. Private void initialize. This .set font, new java.awt.font, dialog, java.awt.font.plain, 12. This .set size, 500, 375. This set default closey operation, javax.swing.windowConstants.dispose_on_close. This set content pane, get jcontent pane. This method initializes jcontent pane. At return javax.swing.jpanel. Private javax.swing.jpanel get jcontent pane. If jcontent pane equals null. Java.awt.gridBag constraints gridbag constraints 1 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridBag constraints gridbag constraints 14 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridBag constraints gridbag constraints 13 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridbag constraints gridbag constraints 12 equals new gridbag constraints. javax.swing.jlabel equals new jlabel. jcontent pane equals new javax.swing.jpanel. jcontent pane.set layout, new gridbag layout. jlabel.set name, jlabel. jlabel.set text. Gridbag constraints 12.gridx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 12.grid equals 1. Gridbag constraints 12.ipadx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 12.ipad equals 0. Gridbag constraints 12.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.west. Gridbag constraints 12.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.horizontal. Gridbag constraints 12.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,2,2,2. Gridbag constraints 12.weights equals 1.0d. Gridbag constraints 13.gridx equals 1. Gridbag constraints 13.grid equals 1. Gridbag constraints 13.ipadx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 13.ipad equals 0. Gridbag constraints 13.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.none. Gridbag constraints 13.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.east. Gridbag constraints 13.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,2,2,2. Gridbag constraints 14.gridx equals 2. Gridbag constraints 14.grid equals 1. Gridbag constraints 14.ipadx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 14.ipad equals 0. Gridbag constraints 14.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.east. Gridbag constraints 14.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,2,2,2. Gridbag constraints 1.weights equals 1.0. Gridbag constraints 1.weight equals 1.0. Gridbag constraints 1.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.both. Gridbag constraints 1.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Gridbag constraints 1.gridwidth equals 3. Gridbag constraints 1.gridx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 1.grid equals 0. jcontent pane.add, get jsplit pane, gridbag constraints 1. jcontent pane.add, jlabel, gridbag constraints 12. jcontent pane.add, get pnoc, gridbag constraints 13. jcontent pane.add, get pncancel, gridbag constraints 14. Return jcontent pane. This method initializes btnok. At return javax.swing.jbutton. Private jbutton get pnoc. If btnok equals null. btnok equals new jbutton. btnok.set name, btnok. btnok.set text, OK. btnok.add action listener, new java.awt.event.action listener. Public void action performed, java.awt.event.action event e. Try. Validate param. Save param. Exit result equals joption pane.ok underscore option. Abstract param dialog. This set visible, false. Catch, exception x. View.gets Ingleton, Show warning dialog, ex get message. Return btn OK. This method initializes btn cancel. At return javax.swing.j button. Protected j button get cancel. If btn cancel equals null. btn cancel equals new j button. btn cancel.set name, btn cancel. btn cancel.set text, cancel. btn cancel.add action listener, new java.awt.event.action listener. Public void action performed, java.awt.event.action event e. Exit result equals joption pane.cancel _ option. Abstract param dialog. This set visible, false. Return btn cancel. This method initializes jpanel. At return javax.swing.jpanel. Private jpanel get jpanel. If jpanel equals null. Java.awt.gridbag constraints 7 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridbag constraints 5 equals new gridbag constraints. Java.awt.gridbag constraints 2 equals new gridbag constraints. jpanel equals new jpanel. jpanel.set layout, new gridbag layout. jpanel.set name, jpanel. Gridbag constraints 2.weights equals 1.0. Gridbag constraints 2.weight equals 1.0. Gridbag constraints 2.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.both. Gridbag constraints 5.gridx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 5.grid equals 1. Gridbag constraints 5.ipadx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 5.ipad equals 0. Gridbag constraints 5.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.both. Gridbag constraints 5.weights equals 1.0 d. Gridbag constraints 5.weight equals 1.0 d. Gridbag constraints 5.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. Gridbag constraints 5.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Gridbag constraints 7.weights equals 1.0. Gridbag constraints 7.fill equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.horizontal. Gridbag constraints 7.anchor equals java.awt.gridbag constraints.northwest. Gridbag constraints 7.gridx equals 0. Gridbag constraints 7.grid equals 0. Gridbag constraints 7.insets equals new java.awt.insets, 2,5,2,5. jpanel.add, getst headline, gridbag constraints 7. jpanel.add, get panel param, gridbag constraints 5. Return jpanel. This method initializes jsplitepane. At return javax.swing.jsplitepane. Private jsplitepane get jsplitepane. If jsplitepane equals null. jsplitepane equals new jsplitepane. jsplitepane.set continuous layout, true. jsplitepane.set visible, true. jsplitepane.strike component, get jpanel 1. jsplitepane.set divider location, 175. jsplitepane.set divider size, 3. jsplitepane.strsize weight, 0.3 d. jsplitepane.set border, javax.swing.borderFactory.createEtched border, javax.swing.border.etched border.lowered. jsplitepane.set left component, get jscrollpane. Return jsplitepane. This method initializes tree param. At return javax.swing.jtree. Private jtree get tree param. If tree param equals null. Tree param equals new jtree. Tree param.set model, get tree model. Tree param.set showsruthandals, true. Tree param.strut visible, true. Tree param.add tree selection listener, new javax.swing.event.tree selection listener. Public void value changed, javax.swing.event.tree selection event default mutable tree node equals default mutable tree node get tree param get last selected path component. If node equals null, return string name equals string node get as your object. Show param panel name default tree cell renderer equals new default tree cell renderer renderer.set leaf icon null renderer.set apinicon null renderer.set closed icon null tree param.set cell renderer tree param.strow height 18 return tree param. This method initializes jpanel1 at return javax.swing.jpanel private jpanel get jpanel1 if jpanel1 equals null jpanel1 equals new jpanel jpanel1.set layout new card layout jpanel1.set border javax.swing.border factory.create border 0,0,0,0 jpanel1.add get jscrollpane1 get jscrollpane1 get name return jpanel1. This method initializes pane param at return javax.swing.jpanel protected jpanel get panel param. If pane param equals null pane param equals new jpanel pane param.set layout new card layout pane param.set preferred size new java.awt.dimension 300,300 pane param.set border javax.swing.border factory.create border 0,0,0,0 return pane param. This method initializes text headline at return javax.swing.jText field private jText field gets headline. If text headline equals null text headline equals new jText field text headline.set border javax.swing.border factory.create border javax.swing.border.edged border.raised text headline.set editable false text headline.set enabled false text headline.set background java.awt.color.white text headline.set font new java.awt.font default java.awt.font.bold 12 return text headline. This method initializes tree model at return javax.swing.tree.default tree model private default tree model get tree model. If tree model equals null tree model equals new default tree model get node tree model.set root get node return tree model. This method initializes root node at return javax.swing.tree.default mutable tree node protected default mutable tree node get root node. If root node equals null root node equals new default mutable tree node root return root node private default mutable tree node add param node string param sec string param equals null default mutable tree node parent equals get root node default mutable tree node child equals null default mutable tree node result equals null. 4 int I equals 0 I param sec dot length I plus plus param equals param sec I result equals null. 4 int j equals 0 j parent dot get child count j plus plus child equals default mutable tree node parent dot get child at j. If child dot tossed ring dot equals signer case param result equals child break. If result equals null result equals new default mutable tree node param parent dot add result parent equals result return parent. If multiple name use the same panel at param parent params at param name at param panel public void add param panel string parent params string name abstract param panel If parent params equals null. Default mutable tree node parent equals add param node, parent params. Default mutable tree node new node equals new default mutable tree node, name. Parent.add, new node. Else. No need to create node. This is the root panel. Get panel param.add, panel, panel.get name. Table panel.put, name, panel. Public void add param panel, string parent params, abstract param panel panel. Add param panel, parent params, panel.get name, panel. Protected void show param panel, string name. If name equals null name dot equals, return. Exit if panel name not found. jpanel panel equals, jpanel, table panel dot get, name. If panel equals null, return. Getst headline, dot set text, name. Card layout card equals, card layout, get panel param, dot get layout. Card dot show, get panel param, panel dot get name. Public void init param, object obj. Param object equals obj. Enumeration n equals table panel dot elements. Abstract param panel panel equals null. While n dot has mari elements. Panel equals abstract param panel n dot next element. Panel dot init param obj. This method is to be overridden by subclass. Public void validate param throws exception. Enumeration n equals table panel dot elements. Abstract param panel panel equals null. While n dot has mari elements. Panel equals abstract param panel n dot next element. Panel dot validate param param object. This method is to be overridden by subclass. Public void save param throws exception. Enumeration n equals table panel dot elements. Abstract param panel panel equals null. While n dot has mari elements. Panel equals abstract param panel n dot next element. Panel dot save param param object. Protected void expand root. Get tree param dot expand path new tree path getroot node. Public int show dialog boolean show root. Expand root. Try. Default mutable tree node first node equals null. If show root. First node equals default mutable tree node get tree model dot get root. Else. First node equals default mutable tree node get tree model dot get root dot get child at 0. Show param panel first node dot tossed ring. Get tree param dot set selection path new tree path first node dot get path. Catch exception e. This dot set visible true. Return exit result. This method initializes jscrollPane. At return javax.swing.jscrollPane. Private jscrollPane get jscrollPane. If jscrollPane equals null. JScrollPane equals new JScrollPane. JScrollPane.set viewport view, get tree param. JScrollPane.set border, javax.swing.border factory.create temp border, 0,0,0,0. Return JScrollPane. This method initializes JScrollPane1. At return javax.swing.jscrollPane. Private JScrollPane get JScrollPane1. If JScrollPane1 equals null. JScrollPane1 equals new JScrollPane. JScrollPane1.set name, JScrollPane1. JScrollPane1.set viewport view, get jpanel. JScrollPane1.set horizontal scrollbar policy, javax.swing.jscrollPane.horizontal_scrollbar_never. JScrollPane1.set vertical scrollbar policy, javax.swing.jscrollPane.vertical_scrollbar_never. Return JScrollPane1. At javdiclindex equals 0 visual constraint equals 73,11.